Russia had turned Ukrainian land into its own launch pad, a staging ground for something bigger, darker, and far more ambitious. On July 27, 2025, the storm finally broke. From a base they had seized years earlier, the Russian military unleashed what they believed would be a decisive hammer blow. The assault force was massive: 50 modern battle tanks, 30 armored troop carriers, and 70 suicide drones, all advancing in a meticulously coordinated blitz, designed to tear through Ukrainian defenses in a single devastating thrust. But what Russia did not know was that their every move was already being tracked. Their plan, so carefully rehearsed, was being read in real time by the enemy. And as their spearhead pushed forward, they were walking directly into the jaws of a trap. The armored columns rolled into what looked like open farmland. But beneath that soil, beneath the dirt roads and grassy fields, waited over 4,200 anti-tank mines, planted in interlocking grids across a 3-square-mile kill zone. It was a landscape engineered for death. One wrong step, one careless maneuver, and a steel behemoth would be ripped apart in an instant. And yet, the plan nearly collapsed before it even began. A Ukrainian resupply truck, unaware of its position, almost drove straight into its own minefield. The driver was seconds from disaster before a drone operator screamed through the radio, halting him just 6 feet from the edge. A single mistake could have triggered a chain reaction, destroying not just the trap, but the entire defensive operation. It was a razor's edge between triumph and catastrophe. At 6:40 a.m., satellite surveillance confirmed it. A massive armored column was on the move. The Russians had launched their spearhead out of Donetsk, territory they had occupied since early 2023. This was not a routine patrol. This was a mechanized invasion force. The numbers were staggering: 50 T-90 tanks, supported by 30 armored infantry carriers, and over 700 troops marched in perfect formation. Above them, a swarm of 70 unmanned suicide drones carved the skies. These drones weren't meant for reconnaissance. They were weapons of annihilation, each packed with warheads strong enough to shred bunkers and collapse fortified trenches. Their mission was clear: smash open corridors of destruction so the armor could pour through. If a drone encountered resistance, it would immediately self-destruct, detonating with lethal force. Sacrifice was built into the strategy. For the first time since 2022, Russia was deploying a fully integrated mechanized assault. Armor, infantry, and loitering munitions acting together in one terrible symphony. Western analysts watched in shock. The estimated cost of this single offensive push exceeded $350 million. The Kremlin was gambling hard, a bold, expensive wager meant to break Ukraine's defensive backbone before the fall. If successful, it could roll back months of Ukrainian gains. But Ukraine was waiting. Deep underground, preparations for this very moment had been made. Under the command of General Mykola Shevchenko, Ukraine's elite 93rd Mechanized Brigade had spent weeks transforming farmland into a battlefield of nightmares. The minefield wasn't just deadly, it was psychological warfare. Strategic gaps were deliberately left open, creating safe lanes to lure Russian drivers. But these corridors were seeded with pressure-triggered charges and remotely detonated mines. To the untrained eye, the paths looked clear. In reality, they were perfect kill funnels. At exactly 6:47 a.m., the first wave of Russian armor thundered into the zone. 4 minutes later, the trap was sprung. 17 Russian tanks were obliterated in a chain of thunderous detonations. Their turrets were hurled into the sky, some flung over 50 feet, crashing down as flaming wreckage. Smoke and fire blanketed the battlefield. And then came the timing. Ukrainian UAVs circling overhead transmitted live feeds of every Russian movement. At the precise moment of maximum density, electronic triggers were activated, detonating mines under the heaviest concentrations of armor. The destruction was apocalyptic. Russian crews scrambled out of burning hulks only to be cut down by secondary, blasts. But even as Ukrainian commanders celebrated the carnage, they were reminded of the fragility of war. That near miss with their own supply truck haunted them. A single error could have erased months of planning. Even the best-laid traps hung on the thinnest threads of discipline and luck. By 7:15 a.m., the battlefield was a graveyard of steel, and yet Ukraine's defense had only just begun. From concealed positions west of the kill zone, the 12th Armored Assault Battalion thundered forward. The counterattack was unleashed with terrifying precision. 32 T-84 Oplot tanks, supported by self-propelled artillery and anti-air platforms, surged into the fray in a coordinated three-pronged assault. The ground shook under their advance. Ukrainian crews, hardened by months of brutal front-line. Combat now had both the element of surprise and pinpoint intelligence. Their tanks accelerated to attack speed, 45 miles per hour, guns hot and targeting systems locked. In just 90 seconds, another 9 Russian tanks were annihilated. Survivors of the minefield disaster found themselves trapped between burning wrecks in front and incoming Ukrainian armor at their flanks. The skies above erupted into chaos. Russian suicide drones, desperate to salvage the offensive, dove headlong into the counterattacking Ukrainian columns. Explosions rippled across the battlefield as drones struck, but this time Ukraine had come prepared. Mounted on their advancing vehicles were Shkval 6 rotary cannons, multi-barrel anti-air weapons capable of spitting out over 4,000 rounds per minute. These guns turned the air into a wall of lead. The swarm of drones was shredded mid-flight, bursting into fireballs before they could reach their targets. It was as if the sky itself had been set ablaze. Russia's grand mechanized gamble, months in planning and costing hundreds of millions, had crashed headlong into a carefully engineered nightmare. What was meant to be a breakthrough became a bloodbath. And Ukraine, against all odds, had not only held the line, it had struck back with devastating force. Drone after drone erupted mid-air, some detonating barely 30 feet above their intended targets. The battlefield thundered with overlapping chaos, screaming drone engines, the relentless roar of rotary cannons, and explosions showering shrapnel across the fields. In just under 4 minutes, 47 of the remaining 53 Russian drones were obliterated, shredded into fireballs. The handful that survived were jammed by Ukrainian electronic warfare systems, losing control and plunging harmlessly into empty farmland. Then, the next phase of Ukraine's counterattack ignited. Ukrainian howitzers unleashed precision fire, shells screaming down onto the retreating Russian column. The accuracy was merciless. Ammunition trucks exploded, fuel convoys vanished in, walls of fire, and even medical vehicles attempting to retrieve the wounded were struck. One Ukrainian tank commander, known only by his call sign V, the Wolf, later summarized it with chilling simplicity. They walked straight into hell. We didn't need to chase them. We just lit the fuse. By 7:31 a.m., the unthinkable had happened. Russia's powerful spearhead, meant to smash through Ukrainian defenses, had become prey. The attackers were now the hunted, and Ukraine wasn't finished. Drone footage captured the pivotal moment. Buried in the wreckage lay a mobile command vehicle, the nerve center coordinating the entire Russian offensive. Its destruction, or capture, would decide the fate of the battle. At 7:35 a.m., as burning armor choked the horizon with black smoke, Ukraine's third wave emerged. 850 elite Ukrainian infantry surged forward. They had been lying in wait for hours, hidden in trenches, camouflaged in abandoned farmhouses, and concealed within dense tree lines. These weren't regular foot soldiers. They were specialized strike units, sharpshooters armed with thermal optics, anti-armor teams with RPGs, and electronic warfare operators. This was Operation Frost Hook. Its objective was ruthless in its clarity. Strike the enemy at their most disoriented moment. Leave no chance of recovery. As Russian infantry scrambled out of crippled vehicles, Frost hook snapped shut. Dozens of RPGs streaked across the fields, slamming into command trucks and armored personnel carriers. A single direct hit on a munitions truck unleashed a fireball that climbed 3 stories into the air, rocking the ground beneath. Simultaneously, Ukrainian snipers picked off Russian squad leaders one by one, guided by thermal scopes that pierced the smoke. The result was devastating. In just 6 minutes, over 110 Russian soldiers were killed or incapacitated. The rest broke and ran, fleeing across open ground in sheer panic. But there was nowhere to go. Ukrainian airborne scouts had already flanked them, sealing escape routes with machine gun nests and mortar fire. The retreat became a massacre. And then came the twist no one expected. Inside the wreck of a collapsed communications vehicle, Ukrainian troops discovered a badly wounded Russian officer. At first, he tried to pass himself off as a low-ranking conscript, but one sergeant noticed small details: his spotless officer's boots, his GPS wristwatch, and the maps scattered around him. A biometric scan confirmed the truth. It was Colonel